Some internet pages can be subject to some rather strange articles. This includes the most widely used source of information, Wikipedia. Number 10. Borley Rectory became known as the most haunted house in England, and Wikipedia details everything that had occurred there, and further speaks of the history of the house. It was built in 1862, but other sources say 1963, on the site of what used to be an old monastery. It was built to house the rector of the parish Borley, along with his family. It was built by Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull. After an incident in 1927, the house stood empty and was demolished in 1944. The rectory was a big Gothic-style house where claims of ghosts had been reported ever since it had been erected. The reports were in sudden abundance in 1929, after the Daily Mirror had published an account of the visit by a paranormal investigator, Harry Price, who'd written 2 books regarding the supporting claims of paranormal activity present in the Borley Rectory. It's believed that the occurrences began in the 1800s, but the first documented paranormal activity had been in the early 1900s. The first report had come into public view in 1929, when the owner at the time, Guy Eric Smith, and his wife had made contact with the newspaper and reported the strange happenings. This was when the newspaper sought the assistance of Price, who stayed at the house to carry out an investigation for over a year. But his reports were dismissed as fabrications or acts of imagination by the Society for Psychical Research. Price's research, as well as the report by the SPR, had quelled the interest of the public, and more books and television documentaries surfaced. It was thereafter that more stories began to surface, dating back before the 1920s. Some locals had recounted that they were hearing some strange and unexplained footsteps in the house. On the 28th of July, 1900, 4 of Bull's daughters had seen the spirit of what they believed to be a nun at twilight. They'd seen it 40 yards away from the house, and even tried to speak to it, but it disappeared as soon as they'd gotten close. Ernest Ambrose, a local organist, would state that the family had been convinced that they were seeing an apparition in the house. Others outside the family also recall having witnessed a string of puzzling incidents, including a phantom coach that was being driven by 2 phantom horsemen. After the passing of his father, Reverend Harry Goster Bull then took over the parish. Thereafter, the Borley Rectory would come to stand vacant until 1928, when Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his wife moved in. Right after this, the family began to report various paranormal happenings that included the sound of servant bells ringing, even though they were no longer connected, lights coming through the windows, and unexplained footsteps. Smith's wife had also reported seeing a ghostly horse-drawn carriage during the evening. This was when the paranormal investigator was contacted. Price made his first visit to the home on the 12th of June, 1929, and phenomena of a strange kind began. Various objects were thrown around by a ghostly presence, and spirit messages were tapped out on the frame of one of the mirrors, and as soon as he left the house, the occurrences stopped. Smith's wife then maintained that Price was falsifying the events. That July, the couple left the house, and on the 16th of October, 1930, Reverend Lionel Algernon Foister moved in. He was the first cousin of Bull, and along with him came his wife, Marianne, and their adopted daughter, Adelaide. Foister had written of the strange incidents as well as the ringing of the bells, shattered windows, throwing of stones and bottles, wall writing, and Adelaide being locked in her room despite there being no key. In addition, Marianne had reported being thrown from her bed and her daughter was attacked by something horrible. 2 exorcisms were conducted, but they proved fruitless. During the first attempt, he'd been struck on the shoulder by a large stone. The Wikipedia page continues to detail Price's investigation, as well as that of the Society of Psychical Research. 2 films were later made, including the 2017 Borley Rectory, the most haunted house in England, and the 2021 film, The Ghosts of Borley Rectory. Number 9. Clapham Wood is a wooded area that's situated in Clapham, West Sussex in England. 40 Times magazine authors, along with paranormal enthusiasts, believe it to be the location of various UFO sightings, cult activity, and pets going missing or getting sick. According to one article that was written by Nick Brownlow for the magazine, there have been reports of extraterrestrial spacecraft sightings. These reports were found to date back to the 1960s, including documentation of people feeling suddenly nauseous, seeing gray mist patches, or having a sensation as though they'd been pushed over or being followed by someone. The dark history began in the 1700s, when an old woman had reportedly seen a bright round object that resembled a full moon floating in the woods and disappearing. The forest was then filled with fumes that smelled of burning matter. Ever since, reports of UFO sightings and landings have been documented. In 1967, in a village a few miles away, two boys named Toyne Newton and John Arnold had a rather creepy story spelled out to them on a Ouija board. It claimed that the woods were used as a base for extraterrestrial spacecraft, and that one had landed there to collect sulfur along with other chemicals. A few months prior to their Ouija board story, unknown to them at the time, Paul Glover had witnessed just that: multiple sightings of UFOs harvesting chemicals. In 1968, an insomniac had glanced out of his kitchen window around 2 a.m. when he saw a saucer-shaped craft hovering above Clapham Wood. He quickly contacted the police, but upon their arrival, the UFO had vanished. In October of 1972, a telephone engineer had been on his way home, driving near the wooded area, when he'd seen another saucer-shaped craft in the sky that made a circle before speeding off. There had been another report from a couple who'd been walking near Long Furlong, West Sussex, who thought that they'd seen the planet Venus hanging low in the sky. The object then started moving rather quickly, heading to Clapham Wood. As it arrived there, a beam of light emitted from the craft vertically, before rapidly withdrawing and disappearing into the sky. In a book titled The Demonic Connection that was written in 1987 by Toyne Newton, Charles Whaler, and Alan Brown, claims are made stating that the woods are used for rituals by a cult and a branch off from the Freemasonry movement that calls itself the Friends of Hecate. Will Storr had further investigated these claims for his book, but allegedly found no evidence aside for some odd campfires, as well as some not-so-friendly locals. Barry Stevens, another author who expressed further skepticism, had said that the authors had either made up the stories or they'd accepted local legends and rumors. In addition to the disappearances of human individuals, there have also been cases of dogs suddenly vanishing while being walked in the woods by their owners. After stressing their best efforts in search of their animals, no trace of them was ever found. Some have recited stories of walkers who've been pushed or pulled by an unseen force and had experienced a sense of sickness, shortness of breath, or an overwhelming pain. Some believe that this is due to the cult practices that are thought to have been taking place here. Clapham Woods is shrouded in a dark history, and to venture into the most haunted place in Sussex is not for the faint of heart. Number 8. It appears that the Free Encyclopedia had predicted something rather eerie: the timeline of the far future. The page goes on to say that the future cannot be predicted with certainty, yet current understandings of various fields of science can aid in the prediction of some of these far future events. Scientific fields that may aid this timeline include astrophysics, the study of the planets and stars, particle physics, which reveal how matter behaves, evolutionary biology surrounding how life evolves, plate tectonics, which covers how the continents shift, and last, sociology, which examines how societies and cultures will evolve over time. The timeline starts from the beginning of the 4th millennium in 3001 and stretches well into the furthest reaches of the future. The timeline includes events that may address some unresolved questions in science, including the extinction of humans, if the Earth will survive the expansion of the Sun when it becomes a red giant, and if proton decay will end all matter in the universe. In the first topic listed under Earth, the Solar System and Universe page tabulated the following, saying 1,000 years from now, due to the deceleration of the Earth's rotation, the length of a solar day will be 1/30th of a second longer than what it is today. In 10,000 years, the failure of the ice plug will endanger the East Antarctic ice sheet. Thereafter, the sea level will rise by 4 meters. In 10,000 to 1 million years, 2 red giant superstars would have exploded as a supernova. This explosion will be visible on Earth during the day. 50,000 years from now, the interglacial period will end and the Earth will be back in a glacial period. 1 million years from now, Uranus's moons, Desdemona and Cressida, will have collided with one another. 10 million years from now is the estimated time for the recovery of biodiversity. In 110 million years, the luminosity of the sun will have increased by 1%. It'll continue to increase until it eventually disrupts the carbonate-silicate cycle in 500 to 600 million years. The last point in this table states that a new Big Bang event will occur and birth a new universe. In the next table, Wikipedia lists the events regarding humanity and its constructs. 1,000 years from now, most of the buildings that we see today would collapse, and in the process of decay, 1,000 years after, Greenland's ice would be melted. In 10,000 years, according to the table, humanity has a 95% probability of being extinct on Earth. In 13,000 years, the Earth's axial tilt would become reversed. In 20,000 years from today, languages of the future would contain only 1 to 100 core vocabulary lists. In 2 million years, it's guessed that colonies of people will be spread all across space. For Wikipedia to have predicted and listed future events regarding our extinction and the collapse of the Earth, it's certainly a creepy concept, but it may aid us in making some much better decisions if we're to continue to preserve our species and our home. Number 7. Smile mask syndrome has been detailed on Wikipedia, giving details as to its origin and a brief description. Smile mask syndrome is referred to as SMS for short, and is said to be a psychological disorder that was initially brought forth by Professor Makoto Natsume from the Osaka Shoin Women's University. It was noted that subjects who developed depression or a physical illness would be found to smile unnaturally or for a prolonged time as a result of the disorder. The professor had proposed this issue after having counseled some of the students who went to the university. He'd noticed through these meetings that some of the students would spend so much time fake smiling that they became unaware that they were smiling at all, even during stressful or upsetting experiences. The professor then attributed this to the importance that's been placed on smiling in the Japanese service industry, mostly for young women. Smiling is a rather important skill for women working in the service industry. Most Japanese industry companies require that the female staff need to smile for a long period. Natsume explained that his female patients speak of the importance of smiling when they're speaking about the place at which they work. The professor related some examples of his clients, saying that the smile had an impact on whether they got hired or not, and that the superior would often stress the effect that a good smile would have on a customer. It was according to Natsume that this atmosphere was causing these women to smile unnaturally, and for such a lengthy period of time that they actually started to suppress their emotions, ultimately resulting in depression disorders. Tomame Fujiwara, a Japanese author, had found that the demand for smiling in the workplace had come about in Japan around the 1980s. He blames the cultural changes that were brought forth by the Tokyo Disneyland, which was opened in 1983. The attraction, as he believes, popularized the demand for the obligatory smile. According to the Wikipedia page, the syndrome was also found in Korea. Bae Woo-ri, a Korean writer, found that smiling gives the person a competitive advantage and has become an attribute of many employees. A psychology counselor named Yu Do-ram, who had made a comparison between the current society that's full of smile masks to that of a clown show. He characterized the smiles as being plentiful but empty and fake. In addition, this syndrome can cause physical problems as well as mental ones. Natsume found that a lot of his patients began to experience muscle aches and headaches as an effect of prolonged smiling. He also found that some of them had symptoms consistent with repetitive strain injury. As per other sources, those who mask their emotions by smiling often don't get the treatment that they so badly require, as no one notices that they're in need of help. Smiling depression is not recognized as a medical diagnosis, but is rather a term that many health professionals use to describe people who hide their depressive symptoms. It's believed that many people may try to hide such symptoms because they worry what others may think of them. They don't wish to be a burden. They're worried that they'll lose their jobs. They believe that the depression will go away if they pretend to be happy. They don't know that they're depressed, or they don't know how to get help. Smile mask syndrome is a symptom of various mood disorders, including major depressive order, bipolar disorder, substance-induced depressive order, and more. Underlying medical conditions that can cause depressive disorders include seasonal affective disorder, as well as persistent depressive disorder, or many others. There are treatments for such disorders, including prescription medications, stress management, nutrition, exercise, psychotherapy, and even light therapy. Number 6. Jeff the Talking Mongoose, or Dalby Spook, was a talking mongoose that inhabited a farmhouse that was owned by the Irving family. The farm on which the family lived was located at Cashin's Gap on the Isle of Man. The story was subject to extensive coverage in the tabloids in Britain during the 1930s. The claims would attract the attention of parapsychologists and ghost hunters, including Harry Price and Nander Fodor. The story started in September of 1931, when the family, consisting of James, Margaret, and Vory, expressed that they could hear a persistent scratching sound and vocal noises coming from behind the house's wooden walls. It was alleged that the noises resembled a dog, a ferret, or even a baby. It was according to the family that an animal called Jeff had introduced itself and said that he was a mongoose that was born in New Delhi in 1852. Vory, the daughter, had detailed that the creature appeared to be the size of a small rat, and it had yellowish fur with a large bushy tail. The mongoose allegedly told the family that he had been an extra clever mongoose and that he was a freak, stating, quote, "If you saw me, you'd faint, you'd be petrified." Jeff took the position of guarding the house and informing the family of approaching visitors or a stray dog. He would also put the stove off if anyone forgot to do that. The strange creature would wake members up if they'd overslept, and would assume the role of a cat to chase off any mice or rats. The Irvings alleged that they'd fed Jeff some biscuits, bananas, chocolate, and other types of food that would be left in a saucer that was suspended from the ceiling. He would take the food only when he thought that no one was watching. The story soon became popular after appearing in the tabloids, causing journalists to flock to the farmhouse in an attempt to get a quick glimpse of this supernatural being. Many people, locals and visitors, claimed that they'd heard the mongoose's voice, and two alleged that they'd seen it. In 1945, the mother and daughter left the house and sold the farm, but at a loss on the premise that it was haunted. A year later, Leslie Graham purchased the farm and would later claim that he'd found Jeff and gotten rid of him. The description of this creature detailed it as being black and white and larger than that of the original Jeff. Vory was certain that the new owner had not gotten rid of the real Jeff, and maintained that the creature was not of her creation until her passing in 2005. It was also alleged that in 1933, two cousins named Harry Hall and Will Cubbin would go to the farmhouse and speak to their new friend. According to this account, Jeff had initially been shy but soon warmed up to them. But this didn't last long, and the creature would spit at them. It was found that the talking mongoose was actually a poltergeist. Number 5. The RSBO Message was detailed in the free encyclopedia of Wikipedia. The message refers to an interstellar radio message that had carried information relating to humanity and of Earth. It was sent to the globular cluster Messier 13 in 1974. It was initially supposed to be a demonstration of technological achievement, but most believed that it was actually an attempt at conversing with extraterrestrial beings. The message had been broadcast a single time using frequency-modulated radio waves. It landed in its current location 25 light-years away. The message is detailed in 7 parts that encode the numbers 1 to 10, atomic numbers of hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus, formulas of chemical compounds that make up the nucleotides of DNA, the estimated number of nucleotides in human DNA, the dimension of the average man, a figure of a human, and the population of Earth, which had been around 4 billion at the time. Furthermore, it consists of a graphic of the solar system that indicates which planet the message had come from, and lastly, a graphic of the Arecibo radio telescope and the physical diameter of the antenna dish. The message consisted of 1,679 binary digits, 210 bytes, and 73 lines of 23 characters per line, which was transmitted at a frequency of 2380 megahertz. The total time of the broadcast was said to be less than 3 minutes. The message contained colors including purple, red, blue, green, yellow, and white. Reading from top to bottom, Part 1 is detailed in white from left to right. Part 2 is purple, relating to the atomic numbers. Part 3, detailing the formulas, is seen in green. Part 4 is in both white and blue. Part 5 relates to the average height of a human and is written in blue and white, while the human figure is red. The population is detailed in white. The graphic of the solar system was indicated using the yellow color, and the last graphic made use of purple, blue, and white. The page also goes on to explain some of the parts and why it was set out the way it was, such as that of the solar system graphic. One of the yellow points appears higher than the others, which indicates that it's the third planet from the Sun, from which the message had been sent. Taking up 9 blocks is the Sun, then Mercury, Venus, Earth, which is placed higher, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. The page then heads Arecibo Answer Crop Circle Hoax and proceeds to detail the Arecibo Answer that appeared in 2001. A crop circle had appeared in the Chilbolton Radio Telescope area in the UK. The crop circle was believed to have echoed the information as seen in the original message, with some differences, including the location and a figure resembling a creature with a bulbous head. But this alleged response was supposedly nothing more than a hoax, and we've not received an extraterrestrial response from our message as of yet. Number 4. Endling is a daunting term that heads the top of a Wikipedia page. It refers to the last known individual of either a species or a subspecies. Once that endling is gone, that species is extinct. On the 4th of April in 1996, an issue of a scientific journal called Nature had published correspondence where the commenter suggested that a new term be used to denote the last living individual of a species or subspecies, with that term being endling. A May issue of that same journal published counter-suggestions that include relict or ender. The term appeared in the National Museum of Australia in Tangled Destinies, an exhibition done by Matt Kirkman and Scott Guerin. The exhibition surrounded the relationships between the people of Australia and their land. The definition of the word endling, as it appeared in the journal, made an appearance in the exhibit. On the wall above the exhibition of 2 specimens of the Tasmanian tiger was the sentence, "Endling, the last surviving individual of a species of animal." The term was used again by Libby Robin in The Flight of the Emu, 100 Years of Australian Ornithology, and then again in 2011 in the Earth Island Journal, this time in an essay written by Eric Friedman. The essay was titled "Extinction is Forever, A Quest for the Last Known Survivors." It was also used by another author named Helen Lewis, who describes the notion of an endling in her book, The Sense of an Endling. The page then goes on to list the various notable endlings that were documented over the years. The list began with prominent bird species. First, the passenger pigeon. This bird became extinct at 1 p.m. on the 1st of September in 1914, with the endling having been Martha, who resided at the Cincinnati Zoo. At the same zoo, Incas, a Carolina parrot, the last of its kind, concluded the species in 1918. A solitary heath hen named Booming Ben had last been seen on the 11th of March in 1932. The last known dusky seaside sparrow, Orange Band, also ended the line in 1987. That concludes only 4 bird species out of an estimated 159 extinct birds. The mammal section listed another 4. The first was the aurochs, a type of bovine, which became extinct in 1627. The quagga's endling survived in captivity until 1883, but the species had already concluded in the wild during the 1870s. The Tasmanian tiger was the next to go, after its endling terminated the species in 1936. Celia, a Pyrenean ibex, stopped her line of the species in January of 2000 due to hunting and livestock competition. Reptiles and amphibians noted that Lonesome George, the last Pinta Island turtle, had drawn his species to a close in 2012. Up until September of 2016, the Atlanta Botanical Garden had been home to the last Rab's fringe-limbed tree frog, and his name was Tuffy. Fern, the Endling of the Fernandina Island tortoise, has kept her species alive, but she's the last of her kind. Invertebrates included the Polynesian tree snail. An Endling of this species was named Turgi, and his species ceased in 1996. A Bristol zoo tank became the home of the last snail from Raiatea. This snail species had initially dropped in 2012 to 38, and then to 1 by 2015, before its conclusion in 2016. Another snail, known as the Oahu tree snail named George, lived his life in captivity until the 1st of January 2019. It was not only animals either, but some plant species have ceased to exist as time goes on. These endlings are important to species and subspecies, as they mark a daunting end to the community of animals or plants, and serve as a reminder to preserve the planet. Number 3. Visual Release Hallucinations, or Charles Bonnet Syndrome, or CBA, refer to a type of psychological visual disturbance in which an individual with partial or severe blindness will experience some sort of visual hallucinations. The condition was first found by Charles Bonnet in 1760, and the term Charles Bonnet Syndrome was introduced into psychiatry in 1982. Another type of hallucination that is somewhat related occurs when there's a lack of visual input, and this is known as closed-eye hallucinations. Bonnet had initially found this condition in his 90-year-old grandfather, who was almost completely blind due to cataracts in both of his eyes. After his grandfather received a bilateral cataract surgery, his vision became slightly better, to complete deterioration. This is when the hallucinations started. They consisted of perceptions of that of men, women, buildings, carriages, birds, and physically impossible circumstances. It's noted that he'd been in good health and had no psychiatric disorders, so it's uncertain as to where the hallucinations had come from. At 40 years old, Bonnet developed vision loss and, just like his grandfather, began to experience hallucinations. It was concluded in 1936 that these visual disturbances consist of thalamic lesions and ocular pathology. Thalamic lesions affect those with metabolic disorders, inflammatory diseases, tumors, or infections. Ocular pathology specializes in diseases of the eye, as well as the surrounding tissue. It was a French-Swiss neurologist who'd coined the term Charles Bonnet Syndrome in 1967 in Bonnet's honor. His description implies a concentrated neurodegeneration that's found to mainly occur in the elderly who have typical cognition. In psychiatric literature, the most widely accepted interpretation of this disorder is the one of Gold and Rabbins, who had detailed that the hallucinations that are associated with CBS do not affect other sensory modalities. They theorize that the hallucinations are of a stereotypical, persistent, or repetitive nature. It's thought that CBS is a visual hallucination that's caused by the adjustment that the human brain undergoes due to vision loss. Symptoms of the syndrome include significant vision loss, hallucinations, no control of the hallucinations, and the realization that the hallucinations are not real. These vision episodes can occur differently depending on the person. Images of an individual can occur in color or in black and white. The image can be static, like that of a photograph, or moving, like a video. Sometimes people may experience things being reduced in size, but they can be life-size as well. On occasion, some may experience their hallucinations by seeing monsters or mythological creatures. These episodes can either be brief or long, and sometimes pleasant or nightmarish. Charles Bonnet Syndrome may present a series of complications. This may include hallucinations that overlay real-world images, in which case the affected individual may experience trouble navigating everyday tasks. At first, they may not know if what they're seeing is real or not. Seeing something that's not there can be rather distressing and may cause anxiety in the person. The individual may also think that they're going crazy, or that they have dementia or some other illness. Number 2. The Mariana UFO incident was an occurrence that took place in August of 1950 in Great Falls, Montana. There's film footage of this UFO sighting, and it was subject to an investigation by the U.S. Air Force. Initially, they'd found that the unidentified object was the reflection of 2 F-94 fighter jets, but this conclusion was later retracted. The incident occurred at 11:29 in the morning on the 15th of August. Nick Mariana was the general manager of the minor league baseball team. along with his daughter, Virginia Ronig, and were in the process of inspecting an empty Legion Stadium field before a game. Suddenly, a bright flash caught the eye of Mariana, and according to the report, he'd seen two silver objects that appeared to be rotating while they flew over Great Falls at quite a speed, which was estimated to be between 200 and 400 miles per hour. Mariana described them as being around 50 feet wide and 150 feet apart. As soon as he saw it, the man quickly ran to his car to grab his camera and was able to film the object for about 16 seconds. The camera had the ability to film in color but was unable to record sound. Virginia had also seen the strange objects. The following day, the Great Falls Tribune, the daily newspaper, detailed the sighting in an article that was soon picked up by other media outlets. For a few weeks after, Mariana would show the film to various local community groups, including the Central Roundtable Athletic Club. The Wikipedia page then goes on to detail the investigation that was carried out by the Air Force. After having seen the film, one reporter from the Great Falls Tribune contacted the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and told them of Mariana's sighting. Thereafter, Captain John P. Brynildson arranged an interview with him at the Maelstrom AFB outside of the city. Both Mariana and his daughter told the captain that they'd both seen the two jets pass over the stadium after they'd seen the objects. The captain believed that it was actually these two jets that they'd actually captured on film and not a UFO. With Mariana's permission, the film was sent to the Wright-Patterson AFB to undergo an analysis. One report stated that 8 feet of film was given to them, but another states that it was 15 feet of film. According to Jeremy Clark, a UFO historian, he expressed that the discrepancy was never cleared up. Upon analyzing the film, the Wright-Patterson AFB determined that the UAPs were nothing more than the reflections of 2 fighter jets. But this drew controversy after Mariana claimed that the first 35 frames where the discs were rotating were mysteriously missing. The Air Force denied having removed 35 frames and stated that they took only one out due to it being damaged. Later studies were done on the film and a more detailed analysis ensued. Captain Ruppelt convinced Mariana to allow the Air Force to study the film again. He agreed, but only on the basis that an agreement be signed that no frames be removed. The new analysis determined that the objects were not birds, meteors, or balloons, and the initial conclusion was also ruled out. Ruppelt explained that the 2 fighter jets on that day had been nowhere near where the UFOs had been spotted. Studies were also done on each light, but both appeared to be too steady to be reflections. The following year, both the Air Force and the CIA convened a committee involving scientists to examine the cases collected by Project Blue Book. They too concluded that the UFOs had been reflections of nearby aircraft, but this is still subject to controversy. Ever since, more than 100 UFO sightings have been made in the area, which makes it the most active location for such sightings in North America. Number 1. Wikipedia has a dedicated page to a strange, possibly mythical creature known as the Membe, which means one who stops flow of rivers. The creature is a water-dwelling being that's said to live in the Congo River basin. Sometimes the entity is referred to as a creature and other times as a spirit, and descriptions tend to vary. In some cases, it's described as a quadrupedal herbivore that has smooth skin and a long neck and a single tooth that's known as the eater of the top palms. The entity would become the focal point among adherents of cryptozoology, as well as young Earth creationists in the mid-20th century. This resulted in some expeditions that were led by cryptozoologists or by these young Earth creationists, as well as other groups in order to find evidence validating or contradicting the scientific consensus that regards evolution. A paleontologist named Donald Prothero had remarked that the quest for the Membe is part of an effort by creationists to topple the theory of evolution. He further added that the only people who are in search of the creature are creationist ministers and not wildlife biologists. It's been suggested that the story of the entity, as reported by the Congolese native, has been inspired by the black rhinoceros, which was said to thrive in this region. One historian argues that the myth had stemmed from pseudo-historical claims surrounding Great Zimbabwe, and in turn, it influenced the reptilian conspiracy theory. This creature is the Congo's own personal Nessie, Some video footage revealed that it has a similar look, but many suggest that it's a large eel, as so theorized with other tales of such a creature. The story of the Mokele Mbembe dates back a few centuries. Local lore described the creature as one that dwells in the deep and unexplored swamps or rivers of the Congo Basin. The story states that it'll hide in caves and is a semi-aquatic animal. It was said that the cryptid is incredibly territorial and fiercely protects its habitat. A belief among the local fishermen was that if their canoe drew too close to the Mokele Mbembe's domain, it would be destroyed. The cryptid would launch an attack upon these canoes almost immediately. There had also been some eyewitness accounts of this intriguing creature. In 1776, a researcher had detailed the story of French missionaries who had come across tracks that were left by an unknown animal that was incredibly large. The prints were marked with big claw marks that measure 3 feet in circumference. This led the observers to believe that the creature did not run, but rather ambled along with claws spread apart. In 1913, an expedition detailed a creature that was feared by the inhabitants in certain parts of the Congo, Ubangi, Senga, and Ikelemba rivers. From what he was able to gather, the entity was a brownish-gray color and was larger than an elephant. It was said to have smooth skin and a flexible neck with only one singular tooth. There was also mention of a long tail, much like that of an alligator. The Wikipedia page further adds an intriguing history to the legend of the Mokele Mbembe that dates from the 20th century right to the 21st century. Upon a 2016 exhibition, when locals were interviewed by the crew, some had claimed that they still believed the creature inhabited the area, whereas others suggested that it had met its demise about a decade prior. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.